When you think about Vietnam's booming economy, you probably picture millions of small businesses, right? They're everywhere. But here's the thing. There's a huge disconnect between how many there are and the economic punch they actually pack. So today, let's dig into this paradox because it's hiding a really massive opportunity. So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll tackle the paradox head-on. Then, we'll map out the risk landscape to see what's going on. After that, we'll look at some really positive improvements, then the huge credit gap that still exists, and finally, we'll zero in on a pretty amazing hidden lending opportunity. Let's get into it. All right, first up, the great SME Paradox. You can think of this as a story of scale versus impact. It's a real head-scratcher.
Okay, check this out. 95%. That is a massive number. I mean, it's practically all of them. But what on earth does it represent?
That's the percentage of businesses in Vietnam that are SMEs, small and medium enterprises. So, on paper, they're the absolute backbone of the economy, right? They're everywhere you look. But what are they actually contributing?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. Take a look at this next number, roughly 19%. Yeah, that's it. That's their contribution to the total national revenue. So let me just say that again. 95% of all businesses are bringing in less than 20% of the revenue. It just doesn't add up. They're not punching anywhere near their weight class. And that leads to the million-dollar question. Why? What is going on here?
Well, like a lot of things in the world of finance, the answer really boils down to one word: risk. To get to the bottom of this paradox, we have to look at it from a bank's perspective and figure out why they're so hesitant.
So where are all these SMEs? I mean, where are they actually operating? Well, the data is pretty clear. The lion's share, the vast majority, are clustered in just three main areas: trade, manufacturing, and construction. But here's a key point. Not all industries are created equal when it comes to risk. It varies a lot. Just look at this. On one hand, you've got real estate, where the business closure rate is a pretty high 9.1%. But then you look over at manufacturing, and it's almost half that, sitting at just 5.1%. That's a huge difference.
So what's the big picture here? Well, when you pull it all together, you get this statistic that really makes lenders nervous. Over 70%, that's more than 2/3 of all SMEs in Vietnam, fall into a medium or high-risk category. And that, right there, is the big red flag for banks.
But hold on, that risk profile isn't the whole story. In fact, things are changing, and for the better. Let's jump into our next section because the picture has recently started to look a whole lot more optimistic. Let's put this into perspective. If you look back at 2024, things were pretty tough. We're talking almost 60% of all SMEs were considered high or very high risk. It was a really challenging time. But now, look what happens when we jump forward to 2025. Wow, what a turnaround. That high-risk slice of the pie shrinks all the way down to about 40%. And even better, the low and very low-risk segment has grown to almost 27%. This is a huge shift. It's telling us the whole landscape is getting healthier and much more resilient.
Okay, so the risk profile is getting better. That should mean the money starts flowing to these businesses, right? Well, not so fast. And that leads us right into the next piece of the puzzle, the credit access gap. Let's take a look at who's really getting the loans.
And when I say gap, I mean it's more like a chasm. Check this out. Over 56% of large corporations have access to bank loans, and SMEs, just 9.3%. That is a staggering difference, and it's a direct hangover from that old historical perception of risk that we were just talking about.
But this is where the story gets really fascinating. I want you to look at this number, 40%. What does that represent? Well, get this. That's the percentage of credit-worthy, established SMEs. We're talking businesses that are over 5 years old with good low to medium risk profiles that are still completely overlooked by lenders. They have zero bank loans. So this isn't about them being too risky anymore. This is a blind spot in the market. It's a huge missed opportunity just sitting there.
And that missed opportunity, that's exactly what we're going to dive into for our final part. To make it super clear, let's zoom in on one of those big three industries we mentioned earlier: construction.
Take a look at this number. 53,000. Just think about that for a second.
That's how many small and medium-sized construction companies in Vietnam are running their entire operation with zero, not a single, bank loan. We're talking about an enormous, completely unserved market right there.
Now, of course, not all of those 53,000 are going to be a great bet for a loan. So let's be realistic and drill down. The real gold is in this number, 31,000.
Because that's how many of them have solid, low or medium risk profiles. These aren't risky startups. They're prime candidates for credit. They are literally just sitting there ready for the capital that could help them grow.
So this leaves us with a pretty powerful question to think about. If 95% of all businesses are SMEs, and we know they're being held back simply because they can't get credit, could these 31,000 overlooked firms in just one industry be the next big growth engine for Vietnam's banks? I mean, when you look at the data, it's hard not to think that the answer is a huge, resounding yes.